Hey guys, welcome back to New England Next Gen. Here we're going to dive into economics, basically like an economics 101, and I'm also going to talk about the gold standard. We've been breaking into all different types of civics, and I want to start in with economics now. We're kind of shifting our gears. Money makes the world go round, but do we really understand how it works? Today we're breaking down the basics of economics in the US, and then we're going to dive into one of the most debated systems in American history, the gold standard. By the end, you'll know why your rent keeps going up, why inflation hits your wallet, and why politicians keep fighting over money policy. So let's get into it. Part 1 is supply and demand. The first law of economics is simple: supply and demand. Supply means how much of something exists. Demand means how badly people want it. When demand rises but supply doesn't, prices go up. When supply rises but demand doesn't, prices fall. Think about the COVID toilet paper shortage. The same number of people needed toilet paper, but supply suddenly collapsed. Prices skyrocketed, people hoarded, and you even saw resales online. Or look at limited edition sneakers. Supply is tiny, demand is huge, so prices soar on resale markets. The lesson here is that prices aren't random, they reflect supply and demand. Part 2, inflation and money supply. Now, let's talk about inflation. Inflation is simply the rise of prices over time. It happens when the money supply grows faster than the goods and services available. Imagine if everyone suddenly had $1 million. Sounds great, right? But if everyone had that much, bread might cost $500. Money loses its meaning. Everything falls apart, right? Example is in 1960, a movie ticket cost 50 cents. Today, it's closer to $15, if not more, I think. The ticket didn't change, the dollar did. And history gives us extreme cases. In Weimar Germany in the 1920s, inflation was so insane that people carried wheelbarrows of cash just to buy bread. Some even burned money for heat because it was actually cheaper than firewood. As economist Milton Friedman said, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And he also warned, inflation is taxation without legislation, which I'm sure we've all heard at some point, even in our school years. The lesson here is that inflation eats away at your savings and paycheck, and it's one of the most important forces in daily life. So we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve. So who controls all of this? And that's where the Federal Reserve comes in. I'm going to call it the Fed for short. The Fed sets interest rates, which is basically the price of borrowing money. Low rates equal cheap loans, more spending, but risk of inflation. And high rates equals expensive loans, less spending, but inflation slows. When you see your credit card rates or your student loan rates, your student loan rates change, that's when the Federal Reserve is at work. After COVID, the Federal Reserve printed trillions to keep the economy alive. But by 2022, 2023, inflation spiked and they had to raise rates fast to cool things down. This tension is nothing new. In 1832, President Andrew Jackson vetoed the national bank and said, "You are a den of vipers and thieves." And industrialist Henry Ford once warned, "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." The lesson here is that the Federal Reserve has more power over your financial life than you probably realize. So here we're going to talk about the gold standard and what it was. Let's go back in time. For most of Americans' history, our money was tied directly to gold, and that's what we call the gold standard. Here's how it worked. If 1 ounce of gold was worth $20, the government could only print as many dollars as it had in gold in reserve. Every dollar represented real physical value. It kept governments from printing money endlessly. People trusted it because money wasn't just paper, it was backed by something tangible. As Mark Twain once joked, the lack of money is the root of all evil. Well, under the gold standard, at least money had a clear root, gold itself. Chuckle there. Why we left the gold standard, and I want to expand on it. So why aren't we still on it? The short answer is the US, they just outgrew gold. During the Great Depression, gold was like a straitjacket. Banks failed, people hoarded gold, and money dried up. Instead of helping, the gold standard made things worse because there simply wasn't enough money in circulation. That's why in 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt made it illegal to hoard gold. He needed to loosen the money supply to fight deflation. After World War II, the US set up the Bretton Woods system. Other countries tied their currency to the dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold. This made the dollar the world's anchor, but it also meant that the US had to back every single dollar with gold reserves, and that was tough as the global economy expanded. By the 1960s, America was spending heavily on the Vietnam War and Great Society programs at home. To pay for it all, the US printed more dollars than it had gold to back them. Other nations noticed this, and they began cashing in on the US dollars for gold. The US reserves started draining really fast. That's when President Nixon stepped in on August 15th, 1971. He went on national television and announced that the US would suspend gold convertibility. This moment is known as the Nixon shock. From that day forward, the dollar became flat money, backed only by trust, not by gold. So the lesson here is that the US left the gold standard because the world economy had grown too big for gold. America simply couldn't fight wars, fund programs, and manage a global system all at once while tied to the same pile of gold in Fort Knox. So the pros and cons, was it good or bad? Let's break it down. The pros of the gold standard were that it prevents unlimited money printing, creates long-term stability, and builds global trust. And then the cons of the gold standard would be that it limits flexibility in crises. It can cause deflation, falling prices, lost jobs. An economy grows faster than gold supply, then that leads to money shortages. And these debates weren't just academic, they shaped history. Take the panic of 1893. The U.S. was in a deep depression. Farmers and workers were crushed by debt, and the gold standard made money tight. Crop prices fell, but loans stayed high. People demanded relief. That's when a young politician, William Jennings Bryan, stepped up at the 1896 Democratic National Convention. He gave one of the most famous speeches in American history, declaring, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." It electrified the audience because he was arguing that sticking only to gold kept everyday Americans nailed down. Trapped by a system that benefited bankers but punished workers. Even though Bryan lost the election, his words symbolized the deep struggle between economic stability and human need, a struggle we still wrestle with today. And later, even Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan admitted, in the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. So the lesson here is that the gold standard offered stability, but at the cost of flexibility, and that trade-off has always been at the heart of this debate. So why does this matter today? So why should college students care? Because inflation explains why your rent and your tuition keeps rising. Because interest rates explain why your credit card feels more expensive this year. Because the gold standard debate shows us the trade-off between keeping money stable and letting government adjust when things get rough. So here's a big discussion question. Would you rather live in a system where your money is tied to gold and stable, but rigid, or one that government can print money when needed, which is flexible but risky? And here's another question for you guys. I wanted to throw in like a thought-provoking activity. Before we close today, let me leave you with this thought exercise. Economists often ask, does more money actually equal more happiness? Think about it. If you make $20,000 a year and you jump to $60,000, your life changes a lot. You can afford rent, food, maybe even save a little. But if you go from $200,000 to $400,000, does it really double your happiness? Or is there a point where money stops adding joy and just becomes numbers in a bank account? Take a second and reflect. What's the level of income where you think happiness would stop increasing for you, and where money wouldn't make your life better, only how you use it would? It's about those. So I would say for me, it's like I don't think that happiness is just about dollars. It's about what those dollars allow you to do. Spend time with your family, pursue purpose, and have a peace of mind. As Henry David Thoreau once said, wealth is the ability to fully experience life. Or, if we go back to Albert Einstein, he reminded us that not everything can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. I'm going to say that again because it's a pretty good quote. Einstein said, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And that's the heart of economics. It's not only about money itself, but about what we value. And in closing, I'm getting there, guys. As Thomas Jefferson warned, I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. And scripture reminds us of perspective too. Matthew 6:21 says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So here's my call to action this week. Just notice one price in your life, maybe groceries, gas, or rent, and ask yourself, why is it changing? Is it simply supply and demand? Is it inflation? Is it government policy? Because once you start asking those questions, you're already doing economics. There you go. You don't even have to go to school, right? But when you understand economics, then you understand freedom, and that's so key. If you start to understand everything, everything bounces off of each other, and you understand the world so much better, and then you can elevate yourself in your life. So thanks for tuning in. Next time when you hear about inflation, interest rates, or even gold, you'll know the history and the trade-offs behind it. Okay, guys, so that's my short little lesson on economics today. I want to leave you with my email, which is newenglandnextgen2025@yahoo. I also have the website, which is newenglandnextgen.com. I have a section there where you can, talk to me, leave me a message. There's a student space for videos, if you want to submit one yourself. I thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.